We are live, and we will get started now. I think Jose has already got us going. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abdullah Snowbar, and I am the Executive Director for the DMZ and the CEO for DMZ Ventures, for those of you who don't know. So thank you all for joining us today for another virtual DMZ chat. Today, I'm super excited to welcome Erin Elofson, who's Pinterest's head of Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Welcome, Erin. Really happy to have you with us today.
Great to be here.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to share a bit more about you with our audience before we get started, as you've got quite the impressive career path in the tech world in particular, which is where most of the viewers are actually kind of tuning in from, and their backgrounds. So for those who haven't already done their research, Erin was formerly the national lead for the financial services, technology, and media and travel and tourism verticals at Facebook Canada, and also led their auto, CPG, and e-commerce verticals at various stages throughout her time with the company. Prior to this, Erin led the transformation of Microsoft Canada's national partnership with HP Canada, spanning both organizations' respective software, hardware, and consulting businesses. So with that, let's kick things off with some fast-paced questions for our audience to get to know you a bit better, Erin. With the fun game that we do with all the participants called Rapid Fire. So I'm going to list off a couple of questions for you, and you'll tell us the first answer that kind of comes to mind. If you're ready, I can get started.
Let's do it.
Awesome. So starting off, phone calls or texts?
Text, please, and no voicemail ever.
That's hilarious. Hamburgers or tacos?
Hamburgers. I guess.
Your most recent Pinterest search?
Okay, I don't cook. First of all, I'm like the least domestic person ever. But I was in quarantine, a travel-related quarantine with 3 kids in my apartment, and I got kind of obsessed with the ActiFry, like the air fryer.
Okay, yeah.
So I was trying to figure out like how many things I could cram in there, because you literally just press a button, it's done in 15 minutes. So that was it. But that might be like the first food item I've searched, maybe ever.
Yeah. That is so funny. I have not tried that one yet, but maybe I got to put it on my list as well, actually. DIY home improvement project or testing out a new recipe?
Okay, again, not really a cook other than the thing I just said. Probably in the process of moving. So the DIY is really related to staging, which we all know is kind of a painful process.
Fair enough. One podcast that you can recommend to the audience?
You want the truth?
Yeah, no podcast.
Spotify? Spotify music. I love music so much, and I have so little time, like many of you, and so if I can just listen to something on audio, it's usually music while I take a walk or a run outside.
So then can I switch it up and ask who's your favorite artist?
That's such a impossible question. Somebody just introduced me to an artist named Alec Benjamin, who I'd never heard of, which is like this very cool, mellow, like better version of Jack Johnson type thing that I've been into lately.
Awesome. That's really cool. Paper books or ebooks?
Might be similar to my podcast answer. Not a lot of time for books. I'm obsessed with news, though. I read a lot of news. It's a terrible addiction. I probably read 2 to 3 hours of news a day, like whenever I have downtime. I have many apps.
This might create a bit of bias, but Globe and Mail or Toronto Star?
Like both.
Okay.
I like CBC. I like Globe and Mail. I like Toronto Star. I like CP24. I'm a good Torontonian. I like all of it.
That's it. You love it. That's awesome.
Go on and on, yeah.
That's awesome. Dream job as a kid?
I always thought that the most amazing thing on earth, and I'm probably older than your audience who won't even remember this, is I always wanted to work at Blockbuster. Do you remember Blockbuster Video?
Is that because of the movies, or because you want to eat the popcorn the whole time?
It was kind of both. I thought oh my gosh, you just advise people on movies, and you could always smell popcorn in there, and there was giant bags of licorice, and I thought this would be just the most amazing creative job ever. I still think it would. Too bad that doesn't exist anymore.
Well, yeah, really. Who would have thought the days of Blockbuster are now long gone, right? And it's insane to see. Starbucks or Tim Hortons?
Honestly, I'm a coffee lover. I'm obsessed with coffee, but I don't I'm not snobby about it. So I drink everything that's accessible to me, but probably my favorite is Second Cup. I buy Second Cup beans at home. I'm a big fan. Yeah.
I love it. Second Cup is a great coffee, actually, and they have, I think, some of the best teas as well.
I know.
That's great. Morning person or night owl?
Morning. I
Yeah.
could get up and be productive at 4 a.m. It wouldn't even bother me. My brain works twice as fast. After 6 p.m., I can't like do anything smart at all.
Nice. Okay. And the best part about working at Pinterest?
I love working at Pinterest. I actually think what the best part is, you just explained my background, is I always work for big tech. And what's interesting is Pinterest has this big consumer tech brand in Canada. 14 million Canadians use Pinterest, but we're actually a really tiny company. We're a 2,400 person company, which means that we're agile, we're small, we know each other, and that was the first time in my whole career I worked for a company that felt small. And of course, to folks on the phone, that probably still seems incredibly large. But for me, it feels a lot more agile than what I was used to at Microsoft or Facebook, which were also great companies.
Yeah, fair enough. And I agree with you on that one. And this is a great segue into the first kind of intro question. So that's all for the rapid fire. But obviously, you've been heading up Pinterest for Canada, Australia, New Zealand for the past little while, and I'm sure you've got a lot on your plate. Can you give us a bit of behind the scenes look at what your role specifically is at Pinterest?
Well, in a way, my role has been simple and a lot of fun, which is I'm one of a small group of international leaders at Pinterest. And we are responsible for figuring out how partners in these countries, in particular, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, can build their business using Pinterest's audience. People come to Pinterest to be inspired, to live a life that they love. We inspire people to live offline. And products and services are what bring a lot of those dreams to life. And so my job and the job of the really talented people on my teams is to figure out where that connection point exists and how to use technology to make sure that Canadian, Australian, New Zealand businesses get that great benefit of tapping into people's desire to be inspired.
Awesome. I love it. So again, maybe kind of shifting into that, let's talk about Pinterest trends in the COVID era. And I think since the start of the COVID pandemic, Pinterest has definitely and unsurprisingly seen a surge in user activity from consumers spending a lot of their time at home in quarantine, like most of us. So during the first 21 days, as people began to grapple with what a shutdown would mean for them, and I think total searches for home office surged about 150%, and do-it-yourself haircuts, which you and I talked a little bit about before we went live, searches that increased about 400%. So what other trends has Pinterest seen in the past few months, and how has quarantine shifted the consumer behavior in your perspective?
Yeah, so I guess I would start with a bit of context. People come to Pinterest to be inspired, and they often come in a planning phase. And so those 14 million Canadians that use Pinterest, they're planning something. It could be everything from what they're going to eat for dinner to a dream vacation in 10 years and everything in between. And so we saw a lot of interesting behaviors on Pinterest throughout the pandemic. In the very first phase, people were just looking for ways to stay inspired while they were stuck inside. And that might mean very practical things, just surviving. How do I make all of my meals at home? How do I keep my kids entertained when they're not in school? And so we saw, searches of all kinds grow 60% year over year, saves to boards grow 40% year over year. And we just recently announced actually that we have more than 400 million people using Pinterest globally now. And we added the last 50 million quick, that some of the things you've talked about, like all the obvious trends around haircuts and not getting bored. But then what was really interesting is that we saw the highest searches ever around mental wellness. So just a couple of fun facts: a 44% year-over-year increase in meditation, 60% increase in gratitude, 42% increase in positivity. And so people, because Pinterest is personal versus social media, it's a very positive space. People need positivity throughout this whole journey. They need it right now. And people really went to Pinterest to say, how do I sort of take care of myself? And how do I get through this, especially given the reality of isolation? What's happening now, and what transitioned in May, early May, earlier than we thought, is people were then ready. Okay, I've figured out my here and now situation, whether I like it or not. Now I want to start to reorient around the future. And so people began to plan again. We actually saw a massive increase in holiday searches. And by holiday, I mean December holiday searches in April, 59% increase year over year. And people saying, you know what, I need to anchor around something I know should be okay. And people also started to say, how do I reimagine moments? And because the first half of the year, I didn't get to do any of the things I thought I would be able to do with my friends or my family. I really want to nail Thanksgiving. I really want to nail Halloween and really do that well. So we see people really replanning and refocusing on moments, and then stuff that's more existential. Starting a new business, 35% year-over-year increase in people thinking about that. 65% increase in life bucket list, in family goals, future house goals. Wow. So people are ready to start dreaming and thinking about a time that isn't necessarily this time.
That's really neat to hear. I honestly didn't even think about it from that lens. I think, the silver lining, and I'm not saying it's positive in any means, but there's always a silver lining in every crisis or situation. And I think in this case, if people start dreaming again to some extent, and they start thinking outside the norm of what they usually would typically do in routine, and kind of get a bit more creative or a bit more thoughtful in terms of health, self-health, I think it's awesome. I think it's really good. I know my next exercise then in this case with Pinterest will be that I'll be using it to learn, self-healing mechanisms while my partner gives me a haircut on my hair that I'm just not, very comfortable with. Although she did okay in her first try. She did okay.
Had some challenging root situations. It is what it is.
That's awesome. So let's shift into the actual business side of things. So during times of business disruption, especially now with the COVID-19 pandemic, demand for a company's products or services obviously is going to vary from what we used to know as the norm. So this means that relationships with customers and channel partners need special attention, and founders need to think of new innovative ways of approaching them. So maybe, if you can tell us what steps, if any, has Pinterest taken to tailor their marketing and product strategy since the start of COVID-19? And just a quick follow on to that, did your team's priority change at the start of the pandemic?
Yeah. So, I'll answer that in chronological order. I think that what you need to do in a time like this as a business is pretty universal. And I've been through a few crises. Of course, no one's been through this exact crisis before, but I've been through some crises with different companies at different times. What I feel is always the most important way to show up is with insights, thought leadership, and information with no strings attached. I just told you I was a news junkie. I'm constantly seeking information. And of course, we see that as a pretty big behavior right now, and we see it on Pinterest. I think anytime a product or service can offer a point of view, a new way of thinking about something that is additive to their clients at that moment, with no expectation of business, no statements around, yeah, but when are you coming back? When are you spending again? When are you restarting? When are you opening your doors? You may not feel this instant gratification from that thought leadership work, but it always pays off in the long run because you are there adding value, helping them make important decisions. In our case, helping retailers and business of all kinds figure out, oh my gosh, indoor gardens seem to matter to people right now, helping them with practical insights that only we had, so that would help them with decision making. And that really had nothing to do with necessarily advertising on Pinterest or doing something with us specifically. It was about adding a point of view. So I would say for everybody here, and I know Canadian founders, myself, all of them are doing something so interesting, so fascinating, filling a gap that exists. And I think even if you can't fulfill on building a business pipeline right now, you can share the insights, the things that are driving your decision making and R&D. You can do that by having webinars like this. You can publish white papers. And I think, value added information and insights is the best way to be a great partner at a time like this. And of course, not being self-serving about it, even though you are panicking yourself and thinking, oh my gosh, when is business going to go back to normal?
Fair enough. And I think on that same thread, it's obviously no secret that Pinterest has done incredibly well during the economic downturn. And it's no secret that not all industries have been able to see the same success at this point naturally, just because of the verticals that they're in and whatnot. Do you have any practical advice that you can provide startups or entrepreneurs that are on this call for marketing and product tactics that they should focus on in the short term to get business back on track?
There's a question from your first question I didn't answer that you asked me about changing business strategies.
Sure.
So I, like everyone, I did my fiscal 2020 planning and I was pretty excited about how we were going to go to market and all the great things we were going to do. We had a whole plan, a whole set of strategies. We were all really kind of aligned. We woke up in March and realized that strategy was garbage in this context. It really wasn't going to work. And so I think it's so important that you're able to emotionally detach from the strategy you had to be successful. And so I had written this, beautiful document. It was actually called this Inside Information Pinterest Canada. In this case, I was still just leading Canada 2.0. That had this great strategy. It was all really nice, except for it no longer made any sense in the context of the pandemic. And so my advice to everybody is repivot quickly. There are so many things that no longer make sense in this context, either a go-to-market strategy or a product or a service. You've got to step back and say, actually, this no longer makes sense for the foreseeable future, but what can I do now? And that's a hard choice to make. From a product point of view, at Pinterest, we realized we had to change the product a bit very, very quickly so that we could help pinners through this time. And so, one of the things we did is make sure we came up with a Today tab, which actually just allowed you to see, trending topics, products, and ideas that were very pertinent to the crisis. And we've since made additional changes to our products that just, again, make the experience more meaningful at a time like this. That also meant that there are things we had planned on the product roadmap pre-pandemic that aren't happening. We're a tiny company. We don't have limitless engineers. And so we've had to step back from certain things to invest in other things, which all sounds obvious, but the general message is repivot.
Fair point. I think, as you were saying that, I thought of, and I can't believe I'm even going to be using him as a quote here, but Mike Tyson's quote about, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
And it's not about falling down. That's the problem. It's about how fast you can get back up and kind of repivot the model to exactly to what you're saying right now. And I think as hard as it is to actually do, that's the only way that you can kind of get through these circumstances. So
yeah, and expect more than one punch.
Yeah, well,
try one knockout punch, and you're like, we're so agile, and then you get another one, and then you get another one, and that's for me what the experience has felt like. So it's also just been getting tougher and more resilient, knowing that these sort of headwinds are coming our way all the time, and they're hard to predict.
Just out of curiosity, did you feel that your team was in a bit of distress and that you kind of had to play this part of being the kind of the know it hero, or was it kind of you were in distress with them and you're like, we're gonna figure it out together? Where were you on that headspace?
Me personally versus my team.
Yeah.
Honestly, they're the heroes. They are. I don't just say that. We're successful in the markets we are because we have such talent. I've never worked with such a talented group of people that I do at Pinterest today in the markets that I have the benefit to lead. I'm a hyper transparent leader. When I'm stressed, I tell them. When I'm having trouble balancing my personal life with my professional life, I tell them, I share it. They know about it generally in real time, or they know about it through the grapevine. And in many cases, I get my energy and inspiration from them. I might think I'm having a hard day, and then I watch my team in a Zoom call like this, and I see all the things they're struggling with, in the moment or in the background or with their clients or customers. And often I got a lot of inspiration from them around how to better organize my life right now and better organize my energy.
I love it. That's awesome. So the team is core to the success of everything that you do. So
absolutely. Yeah.
I love it. So if we shift into the next question, Erin, just more about how tech businesses can take advantage of Pinterest. And that's really what I want to get into a little bit more. So obviously we know that you're a leader in finding new and unique ways to support creators, makers, and even small businesses. Initiatives like Pinterest Shop, it was added in response to help small businesses during COVID, and the Pinterest Academy, which is a free online course or courses on topics like Pinterest creativity, creative strategy, and campaign optimization. There are great examples of this kind of support. So for business who, and maybe this is in line of keeping your team busy, hopefully, for businesses who aren't already using Pinterest, where should they start? Like, what's the first thing they should be doing or looking at doing? And a large portion of our audience includes individuals in tech. So can businesses with tech products take advantage of Pinterest?
Yeah. So First of all, there's a lot of businesses not using Pinterest because we're new. We only opened our doors in Canada in October of 2018, which is a short horizon. And we love sharing what this could mean to your business because it's a totally scaled platform. Again, 14 million Canadians that a lot of businesses aren't using. So it's a lot of fun to talk to audiences like yours. With an audience of 14 million, that includes men, women, millennials, people retiring, just the whole gamut of audience, both B2B and B2C, of course. And the difference with Pinterest is they come there with the intent to do something. And so it's not even like being on another platform where they come to socialize and maybe your content works because they're there and they're just kind of there and there for hours at a time. In the case of Pinterest, people are constantly telling you what they want to do very, very early on in the process. And that could be anything from some of the obvious things like planning an event to renovating a bathroom to stuff like starting a business and needing the right tech support to do that sort of thing. And so I would say, I guess, understand the mindset of people on Pinterest, very high intent, very open mind, which is very, very powerful for businesses because you're stating what you want to do, but you're saying to the platform, please tell me how to do it and who to do it with explicitly. I want to be inspired by a business product or service. Help me sort of fulfill my vision. Practically speaking, if anyone wants to learn about how to use Pinterest for their business, you can just go to business.pinterest.com. You will see an array of resources there where you can figure out how to set up a profile and do all the important things you need to do to create the right experience there. But right now, because there's still a lot of white space, I would say there's a huge amount of value in testing it out and learning and figuring it out because you have all this scale. And to this day, or at this time, it's still not super crowded in any of the markets I lead. So there's an incredible opportunity actually to stand out and, again, help people figure out how to fulfill on whatever those dreams might be.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. And I think there'll probably be some activity happening post call, I'm sure, because people were obviously pretty interested in looking at what the possibilities are of using Pinterest to support their businesses as well. So that's really good. I want to shift a little bit, Erin, on probably a very more sensitive topic, but an important topic to discuss, and that's on diversity and inclusion and the recent resurgences of the Black Lives Matter movement. Both as a company and also through content delivered on the Pinterest platform itself, which is fantastic because it goes beyond just speaking. It goes also into obviously showing that there's a lot of really strong potential in what you can do through your channels. So as the head for 3 different countries, which makes it even more challenging, how do you ensure that your employees understand the importance of the Black Lives Matter movement, and what steps or maybe what steps will or did Pinterest take to encourage racial justice for its pinners and creators?
I mean, this is such an important topic and one we've talked about extensively on our team here in Canada. This has always been a priority for us. It's always been a priority for us in the Canadian market. But here and around the world, there's still a lot more work for us to do. I mean, any organization that stands up and says, yeah, we've nailed this, of course, is not accurate. And we in particular have a lot to do. So in my mind, just speaking as a leader, representation is incredibly important. So one of the great things we get to do when we build businesses internationally, and especially as we kind of come out of COVID and start back on a path of really hiring as aggressively as we were pre-COVID, we have the chance to build diverse teams from scratch. And that's something we've always made a priority here. And Canada or Toronto, we're the most diverse city in the world. We'd be doing something terribly wrong if we didn't have the right representation in our employee base. And I think it actually sort of starts there, because if you have the right representation in the office spaces we work in, then we start to build the right representation in our products and through all the vehicles that we have to impact. And so this has always been a priority for me. There's a lot of different things we're doing in Canada and Australia to make sure that we are making this a priority. More tangibly, though, at Pinterest. Our board of directors has actually engaged an external law firm called Wilmer Hale, is auditing all of our policies, processes, and our culture to make sure that if there are systemic challenges in how we do things, we get on top of it and we fix it immediately. We've made hard requirements for our hiring managers around the world around diverse slates. Again, for me, this is just something you have to do. You have to make sure your teams are representative. We made also really clear goals on our content and our product to make sure that we had better representation of content on the platform itself. And then also internally, I know probably most people on the call are familiar with unconscious biases, but this is something I think it's so important. It's been particularly important doctrine of knowledge for me as a woman as well. And we are making sure that we're completely revamping this content. But our responsibility extends a little bit broader than just how we show up to our employee base. Of course, we have 400 million people using Pinterest. And so we've dedicated more resources around the company to making sure the content itself is diverse. So if I search for an idea on Pinterest, it can't just represent the ideas of one particular group of people, certainly not just a group of privileged people. It has to be representative. We're elevating content, search content on racial justice, so that people, when they're looking to find resources to get things done, like, how do I have a conversation with my children right now about what's happening in the world? That content is surfaced right away. And we continue to do these things very, very meaningfully around skin tones, just practical little things that if I'm going to search for something again, makeup ideas, haircut ideas, perhaps, since this is a point of passion for you, you want to see ideas that are reflective of you in your skin tone range that represent how you actually look, so that, again, when you search for this, you don't just see a set of images that don't look like you in any meaningful way. So there's a long list of things we're doing, but it's so important that this whole movement really is the watershed moment globally. It isn't, and it's not just a moment; it's a moment that kicks off an entirely new reality for our children. And I know for me, it's something I'm personally committed to in my life, and something that we will remain committed to at Pinterest long term. It's a long term set of efforts that have to continue forever, not just now.
I love that. And I love the fact that there's so much intention and intentional kind of play here in making things better. And I think coming from you as well, you're saying that there's a lot of things that you're doing out the gate and you've been doing and you'll continue to do. And then there's a lot of things, just to your point about hiring a law firm to help do an audit across the board about things that you have to improve. Because in reality, we all have a chance to improve, and whether we know it or not, and a lot of people don't do anything by design to be hurtful, but sometimes we don't realize it. And that's the unconscious bias that we have to also kind of just be honest with ourselves about sometimes, and go back and check what needs to be better. And I love your answer around this. So that's really fantastic to hear all
the other thing I'd say that's interesting and perhaps relevant to this group is this is a moment where it's important that people share. This is not a moment where you have intellectual property that says, well, we are doing this thing, and I hope it's better than what the other tech platform is doing. What I've seen is incredible collaboration across the tech ecosystem to share ideas, openly say, well, I'm so happy that Google is doing this thing, we should do the same, or Facebook is doing this thing. It's a moment where everybody needs to put their competitiveness aside and really, really work together. And I've seen more of that energy than I had previously. And I think that's encouraging because of, on the phone, big tech, small tech, startups, lots of brilliant, well-intentioned people who could provide the answers to this problem for all of us.
Yeah, I think more heads on the table is going to be better than few competitive ones. You're absolutely right on that, for sure. I couldn't agree more with you. So I have one more question before we shift into the audience questions, if you don't mind, Erin. So, talking about not to overdo this, but the year 2020 has been a roller coaster of a ride, to say the least, and we're just halfway through it, or maybe a little bit past the halfway mark at this point. So, as a successful Canadian tech leader and now the head of 3 different markets for Pinterest, what's your biggest learning this year so far?
Oh my.
Who are you?
It's really hard to do but I would say I've had to learn both personally and professionally to focus on what I can control
Mhm.
and do what I can do very, very well, and be accepting of the things I cannot control, which sounds like the serenity prayer for anyone that knows what that is. You have to accept the things you cannot change and have the wisdom to know the difference. And I believe that one of the things we did from a business point of view right away is, again, I've already talked about repivoting, but also going, well, what can we do? What can what can we manage with a reasonable margin of error around, and detaching from the things that were really, really beyond our control when it came to the pandemic itself. And so focus on what you can control, do it very well, and try hard to stay focused on that and not to get lost in the overwhelming mess of the unknowns. I mean, there's never been a time where, like this in my lifetime, where I simply can't see 2 months out. I can't see 6 months out. It's very hard to plan my life. It's very hard to plan my professional life. And I've had to accept that, not get lost in that sort of dark space, and just, have this shorter term plan. That could be everything from, you know what, today I'm just going to go for a walk. I'm going to do that well. I'm going to get out of the house. I'm going to breathe some fresh air, to here's my 30-day business plan. And try not to plan too beyond a horizon that will leave me disappointed because the circumstances have changed yet again. So I try to just really orient myself that way.
I love it. Well, and on the same thread, one of the questions that actually came in from the audience I was just looking at right now was what, and I think you answered a lot of it, but maybe
Mhm.
if you can kind of reflect back at one of the best pieces of advice that you've ever been given, not just in the past 6, 7, 8 months, but in your lifetime, whether that be your professional or personal life. Can you share that? Are you open to sharing that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think there's probably a piece of professional advice I got very early that I probably think about or share every couple days when I'm talking to people. And I was encouraged when I first worked at Microsoft. Actually, I had a very senior leader there. His name is Rich Reynolds. He's probably not on the call, but I'm going to give him a shout out. He still works at Microsoft, actually, on the not-for-profit side. He's now in Seattle. Tell me that it was so important that I became a strong multidisciplinary expert and didn't rise early in my career in just one discipline. And this sounds like it's like this whole jungle gym career philosophy thing, which people talk about using that language. For me, his message was, and I know there's a lot of young people who hopefully are listening to this, is learn as much as you can across as many disciplines as you can before you get caught up on managing people and managing teams. Because that way, when you're my age, when you're in your 40s, and I'm there now, you will be a much better leader than you ever could have been if you had just, for instance, chosen marketing or just sales or just product. It was the best advice I ever got, because I tried every discipline you can imagine. I mean, I've done marketing, I've done product management, I've done product marketing. I've done channel sales, I've done channel partnerships, I've done direct sales, I've done software, I've done advertising. And I wouldn't say I'm amazing at any one of those things. But I would say that knowing all of that and having empathy across all those disciplines meant that by the time I was really in a more elevated leadership role, I could be a much greater leader because I understood where everybody was coming from. And so, I mean, practically speaking, in COVID times, for people who have perhaps lost their jobs, lost career momentum, didn't get that promotion they were planning for because this whole mess around us has happened, this is a chance truly to learn and do something new. And you're not in a rush. I really waited a long time before I took on more in my career. And right now, this whole moment in time is an opportunity for people to broaden their base of knowledge and broaden how many disciplines they have some context of understanding around.
I love how you give that advice, and I think it speaks true to you. I know that you sit on the board of directors for WildBrain as well, which is the world's leading kind of independent kids content company. And if I'm reading this right, I think it gives kids a chance to get more creative and do more beyond what we normally know in a classroom. Maybe that's kind of to the advice that you're
Yeah.
giving, that you've been
I mean,
given.
yeah, no, nobody knows. Nobody knows what to do in university. I mean, I was going to be a journalist. I still like news, but I'm not writing the news, which is what I had hoped I was going to be doing. But you don't really know. You sort of every year in your career, hopefully, you get a little closer to spending more time on what you love and less time on what you don't love. But that's a process that happens very organically. Where you kind of go, oh, I really love this, and I'm going to now orient myself to do more of that and less of that to being where I am now. And there's not a single thing in my day I don't like doing. I love 100% of my day. I don't love that there's not enough time to do it. But I've gotten closer and closer to this blend of things I really am passionate about doing. And yeah, Wild Brain was a completely new challenge for me, which is to help this children's content company grow and develop, and being a board member with multiple disciplines kind of in the back of your mind is also really helpful because you're expected to be interdisciplinary as a board member. You're expected to be able to think in a lot of different ways. And so it's also good training for these types of opportunities too.
Amazing. The second and last question that we're going to ask from the audience comes from Brad Cressman, who's asking, how are you personally balancing work life during the pandemic, and any pro tips around this for people that are struggling to find that balance? I know that using Pinterest is one area, but anything else you can offer would be helpful.
Well, first of all, I think Brad Cressman's my colleague. So Brad, I really appreciate that. If it's the Brad Cressman I know. Actually, but I actually love this question right now. And so in terms of work-life balance, one of the things I've said to my team from the beginning, and I say to myself, is that this is not a normal time. The bar you set for yourself simply has to be lower. If you wake up every day and expect normality and expect to feel the same gratification you used to, or the same sense of accomplishment or productivity, you will wind up disappointed every day in yourself and in your circumstances because the world is so different around us. And so I would just say the biggest way I achieve balance is by lowering my bar personally for what I can achieve and what I can do in a world where there's 3 kids at home. There's all these different things to balance. There's less independent time to work, more distractions. I set different goals for myself and I celebrate them. I used the example earlier, it'd be good if I went for like a 5-minute walk today.
Yeah.
And I've learned to say, okay, you went for a 5-minute walk, you get to buy yourself a latte. Like I reward myself for smaller things. 8 months ago, I had to do something a lot more significant to say, okay, you deserve to do this or you deserve to do that. And so I think you need to set your bar differently, try to hold yourself accountable to the things that create a sense of wellness for you, whatever that may be. Forgive yourself if you're eating too much. I can't stand this content around how we're all going to develop 6-packs during the pandemic, because that's actually not reality for most people.
Sure.
And I've said to myself, you know what, if I only eat carbohydrates for the next year, but I get through this, and I'm well and my kids are okay, then I'm going to call that a win. And so I just think everybody has to prioritize their mental health, do the things that make them feel well and accomplished, and readjust their expectations of themselves and most importantly too of others.
That's amazing. Did you do a lot of travel to New Zealand and Australia before the pandemic?
No, I got this job during the pandemic. So I didn't, but I did do a lot of traveling because my boss is in New York City. The headquarters are in San Francisco. There are clients in different parts of the country. Wild Brain meetings are not always in Toronto. And so I definitely had a lot more travel before. Well, now I have none, except for what I elect to do. So it's a different lifestyle entirely.
And I'm assuming that's a good thing for now. It kind of gives you a bit of breathing room.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I enjoy a lot more time with my kids because it's hard to be present in all the ways you'd like to be. There's a give and take. If you have the professional responsibilities that I'm sure a lot of us have, you can't do it all well. I've enjoyed watching them grow up. I mean, my youngest is almost 5, and I've watched the last 6 months in ways I hadn't with my older children. And I've enjoyed that. The part that's hard, to be honest, is I used to get enormous amounts of work done on long flights. You know, I used to have these concentrated, that's actually my favorite part of business travel is the flying because I get this amazing deep work. It's like the only time I get deep work done. And I find just this, being with my kids all the time is amazing. Being with my kids all the time means deep work can be hard. And finding that space to just really be entirely present professionally is harder than it used to be. But overall, on the whole, I don't miss all that travel at all.
Fair enough. Well, I think on the bright side, knowing, and it skipped my mind that you just started this job in July, so obviously you haven't traveled. But on the flip side, once we go back to a normal, and I hope we do go back to some new normal soon, you'll be having the longest flights possible.
I know, and I get so much done on that flight.
That's amazing. All right, folks, that concludes the DMZ chat with Erin Elofson. And Erin, thank you so much for joining us. We've had so much fun having you join today. And for our audience listening, I know that I'm sure you've gotten lots of value out of this. And hearing from someone like Erin and the experience that she brings is fantastic. Erin, thank you. We hope to do this again, maybe in normal times, in person at the DMZ in the physical space. And we'd love to have you join us.
That'd be amazing. I miss humans. I do miss people a lot. Would love to see all your beautiful faces, and just wanted to thank you for having me, and wish everybody on the call best of luck, readjusting and coping, and having the best kind of summer and fall you can have. But keep your chin up. This too will pass.
Amazing. And with that, thank you everyone for tuning in to the last DMZ chats of the summer. We'll see you again in the fall. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of the week.